what was going to work best for the customer. So we put ourselves in the shoes of the customer and thought, how is this going to make them feel more connected to the brand?
Okay.
Adam Brotman, co-founder and CEO of Forum 3, helped architect Starbucks' loyalty and digital ecosystem.
Where do you find that most restaurant brands go wrong when they are trying to build or scale digital engagement tools?
You probably study this stuff more than I do, but I would say there are moments where you just have to take a leap of faith, and there are moments where you don't. And I think the art, it's not a science. There's an art.
Right. Where do you think loyalty programs are going to evolve to over the next 5 years?
The technology is going to become more democratized to actually let you do the holy grail of personalized marketing. So I think they're going to become much more personalized because of AI. Number one. Number two.
What is one thing you believe to your core right now that 99% of the industry would disagree with?
I believe that advanced voice and advanced humanistic AI will absolutely make for a better customer experience in many of your channels as a restaurant operator.
How should restaurant operators think about AI just beyond the buzzword, especially when it comes to like loyalty and guest experience?
I'll give you a good cheat code for all you restaurant operators out there.
Adam, thank you so much for joining us. I am incredibly excited to chat with you because people might not realize, but you as a chief digital officer oversaw one of, if maybe not the most transformative digital launch in all of enterprise restaurant history, and that would be the launch of Starbucks Rewards and all of the work that you did with Starbucks. What signals? When did you know that this was more than just like a loyalty program, but it was an actual revenue driver?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about this with you, and that's quite the introduction.
Give the people what they want.
Yeah, I would say we sort of realized we were onto something when we got to about it sounds like a funny thing to say, when we got to about 8 million active users, which like you're like, what? Like how? But you got to remember in the world of Starbucks, you're talking about serving, roughly 20% of the US population on a monthly basis or whatever it is. It's like, until you get to those kind of numbers, you're not really sure both if you've got product market fit or service market fit for your brand, but also, to your point, like what's the economics? Like, is it moving the needle? Is it profitable? Is it sustainable? When we got to about, I remember specifically when we got to about 8 million active users-ish, there was a need to do what we called loyalty 2.0 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had, everything up until that point was 1.0. And remember, loyalty was the loyalty program, the mobile app, this payment connection with the Starbucks card as well. And so they were all flywheeling and sort of working together. And there, there wasn't an insignificant amount of discount, et cetera. But we were using, you have to go, just remember, this is going back in the Wayback Machine, but we had paper postcards that we mailed to people. We had gold cards with your name printed on it.
Oh, I had one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we had gotten to a place where between the signals we got on social, the rise of the program, the rise of the discounts from the program, frankly, and that, it was like, okay, this is a very serious moment. Like, are we gonna ramp this thing forever? And are we believers in it? So we really started analyzing what it was doing for the business in terms of incrementality, et cetera. And we, the answer was a resounding yes. And at that point we said, okay, but we need to fine tune this program. And we did, and we went from there.
Awesome. I mean, were there any core? You mentioned the digital flywheel, and I think that's a great example, a great picture that just starts to keep itself going. Were there any core principles that you used when you were architecting this solution that really kind of you felt drove that flywheel?
Yeah. I mean, the most core principle of all, obviously, was what was going to work best for the customer. So we put ourselves in the shoes of the customer and thought, what for them, how is this going to make them feel more connected to the brand? And which is interesting to say around like loyalty and mobile payment and the mobile app and the Starbucks card, because they're sort of mechanical in some senses, and they were or functional. But we always wanted it to be something that made you feel like emotionally more connected to the brand through that. So made you feel just more dialed in. And so that was a core principle the whole time was, what are customers already doing with their phone in our stores? How are they sort of behaving towards the brand? And that's what we always, so everything we did was like picturing ourselves. I mean, I was customer zero, right? So I mean, me and my team, we wanted this product. We were excited about this product. We were diehard Starbucks users. And so we just took it from the perspective of, what do we want? And actually it kind of worked out nicely that at the time, I'm older now, but I was, in my late 30s or whatever. I was like the perfect generational sort of age and adopter. I was sort of I still Gen Xer and had boomer parents, but I also was an early adopter of all things digital. And so I was like, what do I want as somebody who's like a user of the brand and a customer of the brand and remembers and knows what it's like to not be digital, but understands the magic potential. And so it was sort of surfing right in there that was our core principle was like design something that the customers would want, but knowing a little bit where the puck was going and saying like, oh, let's do this and let's do that because I would want that. So I'm guessing a lot of other people would want that. And it turned out we were right.
Yeah, I think I've heard this from multiple people when talking about different projects. And you hear this if you talk to even, musicians or anyone who's creating something of like, I want it to be something that I would actually want to use. That you believe in it because you're like, I would want this. Surely other people will want this too. I love that there's that outside in customer focused development piece. But that's really only one part of what you're doing there, because at a massive company like Starbucks, especially, right, during those years, it's this huge operation. You can feel, this creative and this passionate about it, but there are a ton of different stakeholders involved that you have to then get alignment for to bring this to bear. Like, how did you get baristas, the IT department, marketing, store ops, all those different pieces aligned into this one cross-functional system? Because this was a big transformative moment. Talk to me about that experience.
Yeah, it didn't happen all at once. So that's the answer. So by the way, you're totally right. You're right, Andy. Like you got to go all the way back. Like when I was hired, we didn't have free Wi-Fi. Let alone a mobile app, let alone a digital loyalty program, like all these things. So we had a Starbucks gift card that you could buy for your friends and your teachers and your neighbors and your customers. And so that was a strong program. And we had to sort of let success beget success. And we needed to also remember when I was hired in, it was in the middle of the Great Recession. And so Starbucks comps were negative. And there was quite a bit of consternation at the brand around, how are we going to turn this around? And so part of what I was doing was trying to help drive store traffic and help, and my team and I were trying to help create more brand love that would help the company, so it was like help the customer, help the company, use digital magic, but do it in a way that we could create alignment. So what we did is a couple things I did that helped. One thing that I did when I came in is that I wanted to make sure that I could breed trust and credibility in the effort of our digital ventures group, which is what we called ourselves, our little team.
Okay.
And so, and frankly, credit goes to Howard Schultz because he didn't understand digital, but he had a great instinct for it. And he was like, Adam, I believe in you and the team, but you're going to have to prove yourself and you're going to have to get trust and credibility from the team. And the way you do that is you have to learn the business. So it wasn't enough to just become a digital expert, which was hard. I wasn't really, I became one, so to speak, over time, but I had to go to school on Silicon Valley. I had to really learn digital, but that wouldn't have been enough. I couldn't have just become like really savvy at understanding like the power of digital and all these ideas. That wouldn't have been enough. I had to learn the Starbucks business. And the way you can't, there's no substitute or shortcut for that. So I got up, to answer your question, I got up at 7 a.m. God is my witness. You can ask the Starbucks leadership team at the time. I got up at 7 a.m. every morning, practically 7 days a week, and met with the leader, Cliff Burrows, and his leadership team that was running the North American business. This is when you say the baristas, the operations, the supply chain.
Right. Actual store folks that are running the store.
Yeah, there's a group of people that run the U.S. business. This is true of every market in Starbucks. Like, they run it, and they get up at 7 a.m. every morning, and they get together. At least they did at the time, and they would look at yesterday's comps, and they would talk about all the initiatives, and they would run the business every day. I mean, it was retail is detail. It's like they had their shirt sleeves rolled up, and they were running that business, and they were turning it around. And I got up every morning with them as the new digital guy, and I was like learning the business. I didn't, so what happened though is they saw me as somebody who was curious and humble and learning, and I did learn that business from them. And so that when I could talk about, let's do free Wi-Fi. Here's why we should do free Wi-Fi. Here's why we should connect the payment card, the Starbucks card, to a loyalty program, to a mobile app, because if they scan their phone in line, it allows them to make eye contact with the barista. It takes maybe 5-6 seconds out of the line. And they were already thinking about those things. And I was thinking about those things because of what was happening in drive-through. So I was able to speak their language, understand what drives the business, what prevents line blocking, which is going to ultimately translate into comp, what helps with taking one less step out of the barista's point of sale complexity to put it in the hands of the customer. And then that translated eventually more into loyalty, that eventually translated to mobile order and pay. But it didn't happen on like one day where I could say, everybody line up. I've got this big vision for digital, and this is what we're going to do. It was letting ourselves prove ourselves over time, and prove ourselves that we understood the business, that we understood digital, that we could connect those dots. And then eventually they came to trust us and believe in us. And then at some point it sort of bared itself out, and it became an obvious driver of the business. And they were like, give us more.
Yeah. Then it's a different problem, right?
It didn't. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But it didn't start that way.
No, so frame this practically for us though, because what is the amount of time that went from kind of you starting and you start to be going into sponge mode, learning the business, going from that start all the way through, the pilot phase of this, and then, in launch? How much time are we talking about here?
Oh, years. I mean, so
years, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So first of all, remember everything that happened. There was this great team. I had the privilege of leading it, but I had this great team of folks that were running payment and digital marketing and digital product and loyalty and analytics. And so what happened is, in 2009, in the depths of the recession,
Mm-hmm.
I was in study mode. So a whole year of like, what should we be doing about this? What is the strategy? What's going on with the business? And it wasn't until, I want to say, early 2010 that we started to implement the strategy. Started with free Wi-Fi, loyalty as well in 2010, and the app in 2010. And it was like, okay, let's connect these things. But it wasn't until 2012 that I mentioned earlier that we kind of realized, like, okay, we need to do loyalty 2.0. And we were doing a lot of things that like don't seem like they were connected, but we were doing things in the app. Like, we had a pretty innovative partnership with Apple for the iOS app, where we would put in a free paid app of the week into the app.
I remember that. Yeah.
It was driving it was an example of the flywheel. It was an example of like, well, okay, you want to check your card balance, you want to reload it, and the insight was that people were using. Remember, the app came out, the iPhone came out itself in 2007, I believe, and the app
7, right? I mean, this was one of the first restaurant apps to really go heavy into this is part of your experience with the brand.
That's right. So that we were thinking like people want to interact with the world and therefore us through their phone. So let's give them an app in a native way that's going to be really interesting. So that included the ways that you would load your card and reload your card and sign up for auto pay, the way you check your balance, check your star balance, be able to understand what kind of rewards and points you had and stars, we call them. But at the same time, we were also like, what else could they be doing with their app that's really interesting and that's not just promotional? So we gave away free apps within our app.
Right.
We pioneered mobile payment in a way that felt interesting, so that by the time we got to 2014, the end of 2014 is when we launched mobile order and pay. I mean, think about it, that's 5 years into my tenure, right? Basically. But it started, we like layered it out and got to a place where, so that's why it's a long-winded way of answering your question, that it wasn't like one day. We just said, boom, here's the strategy. Now we did early on map out our thesis for the strategy, and it went pretty well according to plan. We made some bets and we made some considerations that turned out to be right, but it took think about it, it took 5 years to go from the time I started to the time we launched mobile order and pay, and that's when things just really exploded.
Yeah, I think, y'all went first, right? You guys were some first movers in this space in a lot of different ways, or at least one of the first movers in this space. And, I work with a lot of different enterprise brands, and, it's amazing how when other brands decide, well, we want to move into doing a loyalty program or launching order and ahead and pay type of, experiences, their timelines are so short. Because I think there's a lot, there's a lot of external pressure. There's a lot of pressure from boards to make sure, like, hey, this is the thing you gotta be doing. It's table stakes now, right? But some of these timelines are just so short for something that can be so operationally, impactful potentially, and important things to do. So it's interesting to hear how long you all took, even as first movers, to kind of work through that and iron a lot of that out. I'm curious, there's a balance, as especially as a creator, but also someone working in a business that's so dependent upon operations. There's kind of like, you have to have this balance between what's sexy in tech, right? Like some different crazy personalization stuff you could do or interesting things you could do, but then also what's actually operationally achievable in store. Sometimes those things will kind of be a tension that you have to balance. Do you have any examples or do you have any thoughts around how you would balance, doing something that's a little bit more sexy and out there versus something that's more operationally achievable?
We always have to balance those things. I mean, we try. I'm a big believer in sort of having a baseline of innovation. So in other words, you always want to be sort of thinking about like, what's the next thing I could be doing that is experimenting and piloting something innovative, and seeing if it. I mean, this is true of digital products and physical products, right? So I always like to see the teams that I'm leading, and I learned this from Starbucks, but I always like to see the teams I'm leading have both. Like, hey, how do we make sure that what we're doing is for sure scalable and always on everywhere? But like, what are the things that we're trying and that might not be scalable, but it's okay because we're going to learn, and then we can either decide to fix them to make them more scalable or just kill them. But I like a brand that is constantly. I mean, we tried so many cool things at Starbucks in our day. Like we did tweet a coffee. We did AR, VR things that we built into our app. We did. It's funny now because it's sort of becoming more, standard, but we did the whole thing. We piloted these natural language things with Alexa and in the car, and like, it I was always a big fan of my team sort of working on those things, but we never did them in a way that like you were just going to like throw it out there and just like hope it worked. And nor were we like afraid to try things that could fail or not scale, because, how are you going to learn? So that I feel like there's a good balance between those two.
Yeah, that's a good point. You really do have to have a balance. You can't weigh one way or the other. But I mean, so it's interesting. A lot of what Starbucks did, though, some of it just seems so obvious now, but it wasn't obvious necessarily back then. It was stuff that had to be proved out. Where this would be kind of a good spot to give advice to other folks listening who might be going through and thinking through similar problems that you had thought through. Where do you find that most restaurant brands go wrong when they are trying to build or scale digital engagement tools?
I don't know where they go wrong. I don't have a lot of examples. I mean, you probably study this stuff more than I do, but I would say that it's going back to what I was just saying. Like, there are moments where you just have to take a leap of faith, and there are moments where you don't. And I think the art, it's not a science. There's an art to, and I'm not claiming I've perfected it or anything. Like, there's an art.
No, of course not. I think you have unique experience, though.
Yeah. I mean, I look back and there are moments where we did just say, well, okay, let's give this a go. This should work. It should be fine. But, and there are times where you're like, you don't have a safety net. So like, for example, like usually with new features and innovation, there's a safety net of like, I'm going to pilot this in a small number of users or in an area. And if it doesn't work, I can just sort of, revert back and whatever. Like the worst case scenarios, we tried something, it didn't work. We have a little bit of, egg on our face, but it's okay because people like the fact that we're trying things. There are other times where you're just like, okay, that's going to be harder to revert back. So for example, when we launched mobile order and pay, when we lit it up, we lit it up in the city of Portland. So it was like, there was a moment where I was like, oh God, I hope I don't break Portland. Right. Like that was an exciting but nerve-wracking moment. But if we hadn't have done that, we never would have really been able to know, can mobile order and pay actually work in a way without breaking the system? Remember people were going to like skip the line and baristas were going to have to like understand that like, this is for someone who's not in the store right now and they're going to come and get it. And, where do you put the drink? And of course it led to operational problems down the line when it became, 10, 20, 30% of the orders. But even at first we were like, is this going to work? So there are moments where you have to, just take a chance. And that part, I don't know how to give advice to, because it's like, like I said, you have to know your own business,
right,
and understand, what risks, what the trade-offs are. But I think the biggest way you avoid getting into too much trouble, but yet still innovate, is you just, do these things in progression and create a baseline of improvement and a baseline of always on, and then understand how to like push on new things in ways that are kind of test or piloted, and then like learn and be like, yeah, do I feel good enough to like turn that on? So I don't know if that's really advice, but my advice would be, don't let anybody tell you don't let the rest of the organization prevent you from constantly sort of reinventing what you're doing in a way that's experimental, and create that sort of perfect surfing place where you've got credibility as a digital leader or as a marketing leader or whatever your position is. If you're in charge of this innovation, like create that sort of that healthy tension between, I've got trust and credibility in the organization with the operators, with my CEO, with whoever, so I can they trust me that I'm probably suggesting good ideas of innovation, but I'm also not just going to like push it too far too fast, because I understand the business.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You've touched on, I mean, the operational changes that come with something new at this. When you launched mobile order and pay, I was working for Jack in the Box at the time. My wife and I were living in San Diego, and I was part of the innovation team that was looking to the very same thing that your teams were solving. I just found it so fascinating, and I thought it was, it was such a big thing. I mean, we used the minute it got turned on in San Diego, we used it all the time, to order breakfast on the go and to be able to do all of that. And I just remember, because I was also sitting in the industry, working on similar problems, I was so curious. So I get a chance to ask you, like, what problems did you feel like mobile order and pay solved that got better? But then what were the new ones you found immediately that it introduced? And then like how did you work through those challenges?
First of all, just to kind of bring you into the building at the time, like the chief technology officer at Starbucks, a guy named Kurt Garner, who was my absolute friend and partner. He's now a top executive running Chipotle. And like, and then I had, Denise Nelson, who was at the time, I want to say a VP or SVP of operations. Like we got together, so ops, technology, digital and marketing, and we collaborated in a literal war room around, okay, what are we trying to solve here? How are we going to do this? And like a lot of other restaurant chains at the time, we didn't really like how they were thinking about mobile order and pay, or ordering ahead. They were doing, for one reason or another, we felt like they were not really building it from a customer perspective. They were building it from an operational perspective or from a technology perspective. And one of the things that we committed to was really thinking about like, okay, well, I'm a customer, like in my mind, how do I normally think about my occasion? Like, how, I'm going to think about like, okay, I want to get Starbucks. I want to get a breakfast sandwich. I want to get a coffee. I'm going to start thinking about what store am I going to? Is it on my way to work? Is it, so I'm going to be thinking about store. I'm going to be thinking about my order, and I'm going to be thinking about, how I build my order, how I would expect to see that on the phone, how I'd expect to see that when I show up. And we just and then it was great because Kurt, for example, understood our POS system, and we realized like we need to connect it to the POS system. We need the payment, it was like the final link or final gear, whatever you want, analogy you want to give it, in that flywheel, in that chain of like payment to loyalty to phone to store. But doing that in a way that was all in the mind of how a customer doesn't care about any of that. Customer's like, I order and I just magically, it gets paid for. I magically get my points. The thing magically sits on the counter, perfectly done. And I understood the whole thing the whole time. So I'll give you a couple of the problems we were trying to solve for that you're mentioning. One is, how important was estimated wait time going to be? Like we knew early on that the way we were building this was, we weren't going to try and trigger your order when you got there or trigger it with geo services, although we did experiment with that with Postmates, by the way. We did a really innovative deal when we did delivery with Postmates way early on. We were ahead of our time, and they actually worked with us to fire like location services, just like they do now with a lot of Uber Eats and DoorDash things. But we weren't trying to do any of that. We were like, nope, we're not going to try and do that, because that was actually going to be operationally complex to do that. So I'm glad I'm on like a restaurant show so I can nerd out on this for a second.
Right.
basically the operators, just like Kurt was amazing, Denise was amazing. She was like, hey, Kurt was thinking about like, how do we already have a point of sale system that can actually like, we can sort of, look at the menu, look at the pricing, look at digital 86ing things, for example. Like, how are we going to deal with like outages, temporary outages? How are we going to deal with, various pricing? How are we going to deal with like, the finance planning and accounting around all this? So like we were thinking about like, okay, we have a point of sale system, but we can tie it into that. That's great. We didn't have a second make line. So we knew operationally, like this was going to probably help with capacity a little bit, but because we were taking the order out of the POS into the hands of the customer, but yet it was going to like, just fire a chit or a ticket in the store that the operators were going to have to deal with. And I remember Denise and the operators were doing a really good job of saying, hey, let's not overcomplicate this. Like the baristas know how to make an order when it gets, whether it's POS, whether it's drive-through, this is just another channel. So they're like, we know how to deal with multi-channel. This is just another channel. Let's not overcomplicate things. But unlike the drive-through and the POS, the customer was there.
Yeah, that's right. They're not there. They're not throttled by the natural, throttling that happens in a line in the store or in the drive-through.
Yeah. So the biggest thing at first was estimated wait time. So that was one of the biggest challenges we had to sort of think through was like, do we need, and we tried, we always had an estimated wait time, but it was a complete, not fabrication, but kind of a guess.
It was a guess, right? An educated guess based on limited data.
It was. And it's fascinating, so that, anyways, that was a big issue that we were not sure if it was going to work, just to do like a best guess on the wait time and just let people, figure out in reality how it was going to work. It ended up working out pretty well, at least for a while. When it became like everything else, when it became so successful and there were so many orders,
Yeah.
I think wait time, not having it be accurate, not sequencing some of the things that they're trying to tackle now, which I think they're really smart about. Like at first it was more of like, let's just get it out there and let the operators kind of figure out how to do it and let the customers also figure out. So I don't know if you remember, but like, I remember when we rolled it out nationally and we were studying it, I would be fascinated by everyone did sort of what I would do, which is like, well, I'm going to figure out when in my morning routine
Yes.
or when, like I'm going to fire the order when I'm in between brushing my teeth and walking out the door, or like,
I 100% did that. I knew when I hit this one stop sign in La Mesa that I would be able to pick up that order right on time if I hit the button right then.
so people figured that out. Like it's actually kind of a wisdom of the crowd sort of a moment ish, but it's more the individual, but it was this notion of like, it'll sort itself out, which it mostly did. Now, that the problem didn't become the customer couldn't figure it out. They could figure it out. It was more of when it became kind of the mosh pit and you had too many things going on that it became a problem.
In the store, like for making drinks. I'm picturing that there's that scene in The Bear where they turn on online ordering and then suddenly the tickets start printing. That my hands were sweating when I was watching. I was so stressed out because I remember that type of stuff happening, especially in early tests with online ordering. So I can imagine it started to get like that.
Me too. There's two things that are kind of fun to think about just as like restaurant guys kind of talking shop here. One is now when you look at, they're starting to really do really a lot of smart things at Starbucks around like the ticket comes, but only one at a time comes out of the sticker printer, and which presents its own challenges as well if they're not paying attention to it. But it prevents that thing that you just said. The other thing I thought that was interesting is watching Domino's. Domino's during the whole time Starbucks was really building up its share of digital orders. Domino's was, of course, as well. And they had that thing. I was always fascinated. They had that little like meter that showed
the pizza tracker.
The pizza tracker.
Yeah.
And I was
it was all
convinced,
fabricated in the background.
Exactly. I was convinced that it was fabricated. Yeah.
It totally was.
I was convinced that it was fabricated, but like our estimated wait time, it was super smart of them.
Based on a guess, close enough that it's real.
And it gave you like less like waiting anxiety, like, oh, things are happening, like, so again, kudos to them. I thought that they did an excellent job of that. And, I just, you watch, so you asked like what other people did, that advice of what they could be doing better. I actually tend to more like focus on like examples, what people did well. And, I thought Domino's did a nice job of that. And, I'm actually just fascinated right now also by DoorDash and Uber Eats and Grubhub. It just as a phenomenon in the restaurant industry.
Right.
I'm just literally fascinated by what a factor it's become post-COVID in the restaurant world right now.
Dive in a little bit more there, because I agree. I mean, it's certainly exploded, and I know a lot of us were kind of looking to see, hey, would this be a little blip in COVID just because of the natural thing that was happening with the pandemic, and then would it slow down? But it didn't really slow down. Consumer behavior did change. What specifically is fascinating you about what Uber Eats and DoorDash and Grubhub are doing?
Man, there's a lot. So first of all, in the post-COVID era, it's interesting how what it's doing to the pizza industry in a weird way. Like it used to be that like Chinese food and pizza were the things that you had delivered, and then now you can have anything delivered, and it's become completely easy and understandable how you get that other stuff delivered. So I think it really created all sorts of interesting waves in the pizza industry. I was in the pizza industry through my affiliation with Mod Pizza. I was on their board, and I sort of watched that, company rise and kind of fall, and now we'll see what happens. But it really, I believe it really affected them. Obviously, Domino's and Pizza Hut and Papa John's have had their, I'll call it, issues with this issue of like, do we get on the third-party marketplaces or not, right? And I think they're all on now.
Right. Because they already have a delivery mechanism, right? Yeah.
Correct. And I think Papa John's, I think, was early in getting on. Domino's just got on. I'm fascinated by what it's doing with like pizza versus other for delivery. Number two, um, it's a remarkable percentage of, and I don't know if my research on this is accurate, but I did some research this morning actually thinking about this podcast, and I was double checking, I was asking AI, for example, what percentage of, first of all, how many people are on, how many active users in the US do DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Grubhub have? And according to this AI report, it was like a combined 70 million active users between those three, which is just a staggering number.
That's a large part of the US population.
You think about the US population, like, I don't know what the US population is over the age of, 15 or 18 or whatever the number is, but like, it's got to be like less than 300 million. You're talking 70. So if you get rid, people over 90 and people under 15 are not ordering food. So you're like talking 70 million people. It's something like, the guesstimates I read were something like, on average for restaurants, it's something like 15 to 25% of their business, right? And like, I'm like, wow, like that's insane. That is huge. That is like, I mean, think about it. Starbucks, I think today, mobile orders, specifically mobile orders, are about 35%, I think of their business, something give or take, which is crazy huge, right? Like it's like a third of all their business. If for the average restaurant, Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats represents that. So it means that it's an entire, not just channel of ordering, but an entire marketing channel that you have to, like, you can't ignore.
Yeah.
So it affects your marketing strategy. It affects your digital strategy. It affects your operations. It affects your margins. You don't have data. You don't have a customer relationship there. So it affects your digital strategy as well as your marketing strategy. I'm just fascinated by it. Like, I'm like, wow, like that's, that's interesting. And I, by the way, I use DoorDash, more and more these days to pick up.
Yeah. They have a lot of pickup options. Yeah.
I do too. So like, instead of, there's a great chain here in Southern California called Habit Burger, which I think is owned by Yum. I think
it's owned by Yum. Yeah, one of the their COO is a good friend of mine. She used to be our CMO at Jack in the Box.
I'm a fan of Habit. My daughter loves their chicken tenders.
Yeah, they make a good burger.
Yeah, they do.
And potato fries too.
Yeah, potato fries, charburger, and so they like I have their app, but I just use DoorDash, like, because I use DoorDash like
interesting
for my family, like there's a lot of places that, of course, don't have their own app, like the local teriyaki joint here or the whatever. So I've just kind of found myself doing DoorDash for pickup, which is not, like, I never would have thought that, but like, and I feel bad for them. Like, Habit's having to pay 20% or whatever it is. I don't even know. Yeah. So like, they're having to pay 20%. They're not getting any data on my personal orders, right? I mean, they know that they know that a DoorDash order came in, but I think all that customer data is at DoorDash, and it's not the easiest thing for them to get at it. And then for them to remarket to me and stuff, it's tough. So I'm like, wow, that's interesting, right? Like that's a phenomenon that is going to become a factor in terms of like your marketing and your digital and your customer strategy going forward.
Yeah, and synchronizing all that data.
Yeah, I'm stating the obvious, but in the age of AI, like, that data is becoming even more valuable than it was before. Like, we were using data at Starbucks and J. Crew and all the places I've been, and Mod Pizza and Ruby Tuesdays, these restaurants I've been involved in, and I'm still involved with Ruby Tuesday. Like data is gold. It always has been, but it's always been hard to sort of harness the data, organize the data, use it. Now it's not hard. I mean, because of ChatGPT and Gemini and Grok and Anthropic's Claude, like you have these very inexpensive, easy to use tools that basically we used to at Starbucks pay millions of dollars for the things that you can just do right now in 10 minutes on ChatGPT with data. But if you don't have the data, what are you going to do? So
Yeah, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out a little bit, right? Like,
yeah, and it's also just spread out. Like, I mean, people think that they need to have all their data organized in a certain way, but that's if they have the data. If they're using the punches and the Olos and they're over reliant on DoorDash for their business, besides all the economics of it and all the other things, like you don't have the data.
it's disparate data. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to be really curious to see how that all plays out.
I agree. You brought up AI. I think it would be important if we pause there and chat a little bit about that because it's such a hot thing in the industry right now. And how should restaurant operators think about AI just beyond the buzzwords, right? Because it's so buzzwordy right now I really just want to get rid of all of that. But there's something really important there. How should they think about AI beyond the buzzwords, especially when it comes to like loyalty and guest experience?
Yeah. The first thing they should think about is, if you're not, I'm sure a lot of them are using ChatGPT and the like. You have to understand that you could take, like, we do AI consulting for a lot of our clients now at Forum 3. A lot of our clients are restaurant operators and chains. I show them how they can themselves easily take loyalty data or labor scheduling data and just take it in a raw state and put it into ChatGPT and using one of the more powerful models that comes with the $20 a month ChatGPT.
Right. You just gotta pay the fee.
Pay the fee, use a reasoning model, do a pro, which one of the best ones is called ChatGPT 5 Pro. ChatGPT 5 Pro will almost always, in just one shot, take whatever data you give it and give you back
Insights.
Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, data scientist level insights and analysis and segmentation. So, for example, I'll give you a good cheat code for all you restaurant operators out there. Like, just grab whatever loyalty data you have and say, oh, I want to do bonus point offers on a segmented basis, almost a personalized basis. Tell me what segments I should put my customers into, which bonus point offers I should offer if I'm trying to drive incremental frequency. So I make sure the ROI is there on the bonus point offer. Give me my segments. Like, it'll just do it.
Yeah.
It used to be you'd have to spend
months
and
any meetings, getting people to agree.
Months and, in the case of Starbucks, like millions of dollars to do what you can just do yourself now with ChatGPT. If I was a restaurant leader, I would be constantly saying, just give me what data you've got. Like, don't worry
about it being, just give me the file.
Yeah. And also the other thing is, there's a lot of people that are, we don't have our data organized. We don't have a data lake. We don't have all this stuff. I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I hear you. But like, for now, just go to your data team and say, just give me the last 90 days or give me something that's like easily accessible. And I don't need it like overly organized, but I'm going to just feed it into ChatGPT with a good prompt. And I'm going to effectively start coming up with really good marketing ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tool just to get you even directionally going the right way in a very quick time. I think that's one of the things that amazes me, especially in the large enterprise space, where just the amount of time and meetings and money that go into just making these decisions, where I think in the end, you almost come out with the same hypothesis that you probably started with pretty close, right? And at least go try it and then get the learnings. And I think it's interesting to think about how AI could help shorten that cycle.
Yeah. So the advice I give specifically is, when you mentioned about, like, if you're hearing about all this AI stuff, like, don't make the mistake of thinking that ChatGPT and the like, Gemini, etc. Don't make the mistake of thinking that they're only either good at like writing emails or summarizing transcripts or whatever, or they're only good at very specific things. Like, they are very general tools. So they really think of those tools as your chief strategy officer, as your chief digital officer. Like, go ahead and like make sure you're on a secure, enterprise setting, so they're not training on your chats and your uploads.
Right.
But once you know you're in an enterprise setting and you're using it in a responsible, secure way, like, don't be afraid to just give it data, give it board presentations, give it sales data, and ask it to effectively like tell you how to optimize your business. Like I was working with a restaurant CEO the other day, and he was saying, I've got all these discounts I'm giving across multiple different channels, right? I'm CRM, DoorDash, loyalty. I've got marketing I'm doing across all these different channels. Like, how do I optimize? How do I know? I don't have budget to spend more on discounts or advertising, but
or on consultants to tell me what I need to know.
yeah, just put it in, use ChatGPT, get smart about how to use ChatGPT, use one of the advanced reasoning models. You'll be shocked at how well it'll do for you.
Where do you think that loyalty programs are going to evolve to over the next 5 years? I know that's like a really broad blue sky kind of question, but I'm really curious to hear your opinion, because, if you kind of have a hypothesis of where this could go over the next 5 years, what should operators be doing to prepare for that?
I would say they're going to become, like I was just saying, the technology is going to become more democratized to actually let you do the holy grail of personalized marketing. So I think they're going to become much more personalized because of AI, which has been hard to do from a technology perspective and from a marketing implementation perspective. But AI tools will make it easier to get us to that place where we always talk about like one-to-one marketing and personalized marketing. So I do think that like loyalty programs are going to feel much more personalized to the end user, number one. Number two, I think that the loyalty programs will become more community and like customer community oriented. Like you'll start to feel that it's more about like I'm getting access to something special by being a loyalty member. And I think that, basically like giving early access to things, giving like early access to LTOs and early access to promotions, and creating a sense of community amongst the loyalty members, I think is going to become a trend over time. I think that, and I actually think if you look at like Luckin Coffee, for example, I think they're a bellwether of what's to come. I actually think I'm fascinated by how they've gamified couponing, which sounds like a dirty word from a brand perspective, but if you look at Gen Z and millennials, which I'm definitely not one, they're all about like gamified experiences are going to become more standard, and loyalty programs are really just one gamified experience.
Yeah.
That we always think about earn and burn as discount. As operators, you think of it as a discount, but as a consumer, you think of it as a way to be connected to the brand in a gamified, fun way.
And to earn a status. Like, some people just look at it as status, and it drives incrementality. Like the gamification thing, I've certainly been, a victim of that, where I'm like, ooh, if I go one more time, I can get that gold status, right? That gold card at Starbucks was a really effective tool for me, right? Like, I mean, it's so silly, but it's true.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Status. Yeah. So that's part of gamification, right? Like you reached a new level, you are in a new status. And also I used to be amazed at Starbucks and at J. Crew at like what grown human beings would do for like getting to that next reward or the next level, even though in reality, it might only be worth like $1 of them. Like, you couldn't get them to do anything if you gave them $1 coupon, but if they earned it because you employ game mechanic psychology, it changes everything. So I think that you're going to see more of that, not less of that over time, particularly as these younger generations become the predominant consumers, which they are. And I think more brands are going to realize and it's weird. Like, I'm a Gen Xer, and I just happen to sort of be a millennial.
Yeah, I'm an older millennial, so I kind of we're close. We're close.
I'm a millennial soul as a Gen Xer, I think. But even me, like, I look at now at like Gen Zers, and they're just super like they want They want good value. They want price. They want gamification. They want hyper digital. And I think it's weird because a lot of brand operators are going to want to resist that on behalf of the brand. And I'd say, remember we talked earlier in this conversation about surfing, you got to find that place that feels right for the brand, but also recognizes the younger generations and sort of how they operate, and, find that balance.
That groove, that pipeline.
Yeah.
That feel. Yeah, I get you. All right. Well, speaking of agreement or maybe disagreement, what is one thing you believe to your core right now that 99% of the industry would disagree with?
I believe, well, I don't know if 99% of the industry would disagree with this, but I'll give you something that's probably controversial, which is I believe that advanced voice and advanced humanistic AI will absolutely make for a better customer experience in many of your channels as a restaurant operator. Not all of them, not all the time. And I think it'll free up the time for where the humans can have connection. But I think that the ability for AI to have faster, friendlier, more personalized, more accurate customer service at the drive-through, at the kiosk, in the app. I think people in the restaurant industry probably are no, it's more about the human connection and I think that's true, but I don't think the restaurant industry is understanding how good this AI is at emulating empathetic, personalized, friendly customer experiences. And I think that that's the thing that most of the restaurant industry is no, you don't understand our brand. We're about the human touch. We're about eye contact. We're about all this other stuff. And by the way, I actually believe there's a place for that in many, many cases.
100%.
I don't want to minimize the importance of the human connection. I just don't think the restaurant industry realizes how good advanced AI can be, because they'll hear stories like, I'm making this up, Taco Bell, somebody ordered 1,000 waters or something like that. And they'll hear those horror stories, or they'll be like, no, we're about human connection, which is all true. And yet, humans can make mistakes, humans can be slow, and other things like that.
And Moore's law is real, right? It's going to only get exponentially better every year that this goes on.
Yeah. So that's the thing that I think that you have to embrace the fact that this is the worst AI you're saying that you're ever going to see.
Right.
It's going to become mistake free at some point virtually, and it's like self-driving cars. It's scary to think about. It's scary to think about a car driving me on the freeway with no driver on it, right? But yet, if you look at the statistics of Waymo and the Tesla automated cars, they're just way safer. And so, we tend to think of the mistakes AI can make and focus on that, and we don't focus on the mistakes that humans can make. And I'm not trying to dehumanize the process, because I actually believe that the best balance is using technology so that you can free up the human part of the experience. And so I just don't think enough restaurant operators are leaning into that enough, in my opinion.
Awesome. That is really great. Will you leave us with 3 books you would recommend everyone check out, and then let us know where we can find you online, what you got going on?
Sure. Let's see. I just read a book. I think it's called The Thinking Machine, but it's a book. The last book I just read was about the history of NVIDIA. I really think people should read that book, because it really talks about the history in a lot of ways of AI. I'd also, I would recommend that people read Howard Schultz's second book, Onward, that he wrote, which it was just an amazing book about leadership and brand building and in the face of adversity. And then I have to self-promote and say you should read the book AI First by Adam Brotman and Andy Sachs, that published by Harvard Business Review, that came out 2 months ago. So where we talk about our AI journey.
All right. I was hoping you would throw that one in. I was trying to give you that softball. That's exciting.
Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Adam, Thank you so much for joining us. This was an awesome conversation. I love just talking shop with someone else who's, understands the restaurant industry and can give us the insights behind all the big things that are going on. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Oh, yeah. It's been great to talk to you too. It's been fun. Thanks, Andy.
Restaurant Reset is sponsored by Genius for Restaurants, the modern point-of-sale system from Global Payments. Genius helps you reach your most important goals, whether that's simplifying your operations, speeding up your checkouts and table turns, easily expanding into new locations, or building loyalty with guests. To find out more, visit globalpayments.com/genius.